interwebs, welcome to Let's Build Computers. I've got an MSI Z390-A Pro here. So this is a newer version of another motherboard that I reviewed, well, it must have been a year or two ago now, I think. I last looked at the Z170 version of this board, I believe. And this is the nice shiny new one. So it's kind of nice to get a new one because a lot of people liked the look of the old version of this because this is the quote-unquote anti-gamer motherboard. Because finding high-performance motherboards that don't have all the lights and the glitz and the glam on them is surprisingly tricky these days. Now, personally, I like a bit of RGB on my computers. I like it when they light up. That's my cup of tea. But it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I can respect that. And so if you want a motherboard that doesn't light up like a Christmas tree, then actually this is the kind of thing that you probably want. Let's take a look at it. Okay, let's go on a tour around the board. So there's less to see on this one because we don't have lots of the fancy LED lighting on this. And that's more or less where I'm going to start. As you can see, it's a very professional looking board here. We've got just a plain brown PCB with just black components on it. There's no LED lighting on this whatsoever, unless there's some secret ones that I haven't been able to spot. The audio separation strip doesn't light up or anything. Although, interestingly, it does have a single RGB header down here. It's an analog RGB header, and that is controllable from the board and from software. So if you wanted to, you could put this in a case and just have like a single LED strip just providing like a white ambient light or something like that. So if you want something that is, just illuminated but not garish like a gaming board, then this can actually do that if you want to. But if you don't plug anything in there, then there's no lights on it whatsoever. So very slick looking board. The VRM heatsink up here looks really good. This whole thing is one single piece of aluminium. There's a lot of machining that went into making that, or it might be extruded and then machined. Actually, I'm not sure. Anyway, the point is this whole thing is aluminium. There's no plastic there at all, which is quite a welcome relief. Although, of course, the size of it is quite overkill, but whatever. It looks very nice though. No extra heatsink up here for the auxiliary VRMs, but that's not the end of the world. vCore itself comes from a 5+1 phase setup, which does use phase doubling, so it's an okay setup. It's not high-end, but it's not garbage either. You can drop in basically any CPU you want, and it's going to be absolutely fine. This isn't a motherboard for crazy overclocking with, but you'll be able to dial in a modest overclock if you just want to get a little bit more for your money. It'll handle that just fine. And of course, with the big heatsink on top, you're not going to need to worry about everything going up in flames. Moving around, we've got 4 DDR4 slots. They latch at both ends. They're not reinforced slots, but that's okay. I'm happy with those as they are. We've got 2 PCI Express 16 length lanes. Obviously, the 16 times slot is reinforced in a proper 16 times slot. The second one is 8 times pins, 16 lanes long, 8 pins long, and that is semi-reinforced. It's got some staples in it. So that is going to be fairly tough as well. I believe you can crossfire. I don't, however, you cannot SLI. Yeah, you can crossfire, but you cannot SLI on this board. We've also got lots of extra PCI Express 1-time slots. So those are quite nice. This is a good one. This is a good motherboard if you have lots of auxiliary cards in. So if you've got, sound card, Wi-Fi card, video capture card, various other things that you might have on here. And there's lots and lots of expansion slots on this board, so very good on that front. The audio is rather lacking. We've got a token gesture Realtek HD audio down here with 4 filter caps on it. Whatever, fine. If you're serious about audio, you're going to want to run something else on this front because there's not much going on down there. Although, of course, it's debatable how much of a difference it makes. I'm personally of the opinion that you need to spend a lot of money on your speakers and amplifier before you will actually care about your audio circuit. Because most people are obviously running very low-end stuff and won't actually know the difference between this sound card and a top-end sound card. But I digress. In terms of other connectivity, we've got proper Intel network on here, proper Intel Gigabit Ethernet. So that will just work straight out of the box with Windows 10. No drivers, no software required. Very nice. Lots of additional connectors for TPM. Front audio is down there, of course. We've also got extra SPI headers and things like that down here. Dual USB 2 front headers. So if you've got a lot of USB 2 internal peripherals, you can hook those up. Or if you just simply want lots of USB rear ports, you can hook those up. And that is actually relevant, and I'll get to that in a moment. We've also got the LPT port there as well, so you can hook up legacy connectors to this as well. We've got lots and lots of fan headers. We've got 2 system fan headers down here. We've got another 2 up here, and we have 2 CPU headers here. One of them labeled CPU, one of them labeled pump. So good for water cooling or just for twin fan stuff there. Oh yeah, we've also got the rear fan header there as well. So we've actually got 7 fan headers in total. Curiously, we also have a PCI Express 6-pin power connector just there. And I don't know why that's there, actually. I did actually look around. I read through the manual. I looked on the website. I'm not sure why that's there. The only reason I can think of is if you're running very specific graphics cards that are reasonably high-end, but just not quite high enough to require a 6-pin power connector, you can just supplement the PCI Express power delivery with that connector there. Because the PCI Express 16 slot, that can actually knock out something like 75 watts, I think. And there are some graphics cards that kind of just sit on that power limit, and it's like, it's not ideal. It's kind of like, I think the 1050 is one of those cards where the 1050 and some of the 1050 Ti's, they can actually be just bus powered only. And they're sitting up at, 70, 75 watts. It's not really ideal in my opinion. So I think that is why they've put that PCI Express connector there, just so you can augment a low-end graphics card with some extra power if you need it. We've got a single M2 slot. No dual M2 slots, which is a pity. Rather than putting in a second M2 slot, they've got the extra card connector over here, which is for putting in Wi-Fi cards. So I don't know how I feel about that. I don't feel a lot. I guess you might want onboard Wi-Fi with this, but just, use a PCI Express card. You've got lots of those. I don't know. I think having 2 M2 slots is more helpful because it means you can chuck in a 500 gig SSD now and put in another 500 gig SSD later on down the line, or a terabyte later on down the line. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Mixed opinions there, but that's what it has. That is what is there. 6 SATA 3 ports, dual front USB 3 headers. However, no USB-C front header, which is a bit disappointing for a Z390 board. I know there are hardly any cases that actually have front USB 3 yet. USB-C, but that is also a point of contention. USB-C is something that really should be embraced, but no one is putting the connectors on, which means no one's buying the accessories for it, and we're kind of in this circle of circular logic here. We do have a nice debug LED though, which is nice. Those are always helpful when you're having issues with the system. Very easy to add in, very, very helpful when troubleshooting. So that's quite nice. Let's take a look at the back. So on the back, we've got surround audio output. We've got our Intel Gigabit Ethernet and USB 3 headers. We've got USB 3.1 combo here, so the A and the C connector. So, we've got the token gesture C connector, that's okay. We've got a nice big DisplayPort connector, which is tasty. We've got DVI-D and VGA there. So there's lots of connection options on the back. I can't help but wonder if one of these should be replaced with HDMI. Because personally, I think that there should always be a HDMI port. I don't know. It's up to you. I guess you can very easily adapt DVI to HDMI, so that's no big deal. Or you can adapt your DisplayPort to HDMI if you want. So there's options there. It's fine. That's what it has. We've got a PS2 port and weirdly another 2 USB 2 ports. So there's not a huge amount of USB on the back of this thing. Discounting the C-type connector, which is not very widely used yet, we've only got 5 USB ports at the back, and 2 of them are USB 2. Although, again, to be honest, if you're connecting a lot of USB devices, then some of them are going to be 2 anyway. This is made up for by the fact that we've got those 2 USB 2 headers, so you can add lots of extra ports at the back. But I don't know. I kind of think that something on here should have been replaced with another 2 USB 2 ports. You know, maybe they should have ditched one of the video connectors and slapped on some extra USB. The problem is it's extremely circumstantial as to which is more important to you. However, I'm not here to judge what I think you need. You can look at this and decide for yourself whether it has what you need. So that's the overlook, really. There's not a huge amount to see. There's some very interesting choices on this board for what features it has and doesn't has. So yeah, let's fire it up and see how it looks in a build and what the BIOS looks like. Alright, so I've got this board now installed in a computer. It's not a very pretty computer. This is a repair job that this is going into that's getting quite a heavy upgrade. And as you can see, there's no illumination at all. So as suspected, this board is a no illumination board. So if you don't want lights and LEDs, this is definitely the board for you. So this is all posted up now. So we'll switch over to the BIOS screen and we'll just take a quick wander around there. Let's just turn off the camera so you can see it all. Cool, right, so the default BIOS screen is actually very helpful. We've got, they keep tweaking this summary screen on modern BIOSes, which I'm quite a big fan of. So as you can see, we've got all the headline figures up here, including motherboard, CPU, memory, what current vCore and DDR core, and the BIOS version there as well. We've come with a sort of late 2018 BIOS on here. This is probably the original BIOS, actually. So we'll have a look at the BIOS update screen and see if there's anything interesting there. However, because this is a Z390 chipset, we don't need to do any updates to add in any support on this. So likewise, we've got the easy mode here, which just shows us quick information for CPU, memory, storage, and so on. This is all quite helpful. I like all of this, actually. Again, it's very similar to what we see in normal BIOSes, but just this layout is very intuitive. Nothing's hidden away. Everything that you typically want right in front of you is right in front of you. Even the fan warning control, you can just switch that on and off here directly. XMP profiles can also be just turned on and off directly. Very handy. And then if we go into the advanced screen up the top here, just click on that, we get the more traditional MSI layout here. So we can go on to settings and we can start drilling through these areas to all the normal stuff, which I'm not going to go through because we've seen it all before on other stuff. The overclocking settings, OC Explore mode, we've got normal and expert settings, which hide and show certain settings as you need them. On normal mode, we've got our ratios. What's the offset? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, offsets, that's cool. Ring ratios, we've got the base clock there as well. So the typical stuff that you'd actually want directly in front of you is all here under normal. And that includes voltage settings as well, which is nice. A big pet hate of mine with, I think it's Gigabyte BIOSes, is they tend to put voltages and frequencies on separate menus, which means you have to do a lot of toing and froing when tweaking things. Whereas on this one, it's all right there on a single menu, all the typical stuff that you want to see. So I like that quite a lot. They've also got this weird drag and drop for boot order, which I'm not really a fan of. It's, I don't know. They're just, it's very cluttered. I don't really like this bar, but okay, you know, that's all right, I guess. Personally, for me, I always say just, you know, UEFI is always going to be your default at first. And if you want anything different, spam F11 or F12 to get the boot menu, but whatever. Let's just check what we've got in M-Flash. So we've got to reboot and enter for flash mode. Let's just have a quick look in here. I want to know if it's got an internet flash mode, because I really like motherboards that you can flash directly off the internet. That's a really neat trick. So I'm just going to wait for that to reboot. And it doesn't. It will only update from a USB flash drive. So you got to download your BIOS updates, which is a shame. You know, it's nice when the internet update is there, but whatever. I'm not going to mark it down for that. That's not something that is a make or break decision for me on whether I'm going to buy this particular board. So let's have a quick look at the fan setup, because that's another thing that I always look for. I'm going to drop into advanced for this, and let's go to hardware monitor. So the bit I'm looking for here is, firstly, do all of the fan outputs allow for PWM control? And they do, which is nice. You've got full PWM fan control on all 5 outputs, which is good. And in addition to that, we can specify not many temperature sources, CPU or system. It'd be nice if it gave you more options for what temperature sources you could use. Because, for example, we've got system, but I've no idea where that system thermal source is. For example, the fan that we've got at the front of this computer that's over here, this fan is very apt at handling a graphics card heat issue, because if the graphics card is getting very warm, you want this front fan to ramp up and blow more cold air in toward the lower regions of the case. And for example, you wouldn't want that front fan to be tied to the CPU, because if the CPU is warming up, you want this back fan to ramp up and exhaust that hot air out from the CPU. So depending on where the fans are, depends on what you want them to respond to. And we only really have just 2 options here, whereas on, for example, a Gigabyte board, it would have a couple of different sensors dotted around the motherboard, and you could select what region you want that fan to respond to. But we're getting pedantic here because, you know, like most of the computers that I set up, you know, I mean, as you guys have probably seen, I hardly ever use system fans as it is. You just don't need them on modern computers. You know, or really they don't make any noticeable difference in my opinion. So again, that's not a deal breaker, it's just an observation. But yeah, the other nice thing as well is those system fans, it has automatically detected DC control for the system fan that I have connected. And it's defaulted to 7 volts, which is a very good standard voltage for a DC fan. So that's absolutely fine with me. We do also have step up and step down times. So that is not, these are not big enough to be useful. What we really need is proper hysteresis, and what that means is it's the interval in which the fan controller will wait before changing the fan speed. So if you suddenly get a temperature spike and the fan monitor goes, oh, the temperature's gone up, therefore we need to step the fan up. The thing is that, for example, on your CPU temperature, the CPU temperature can bounce up and down very, very rapidly. It can change by 10 or 20 degrees in a second. And if that is just a burst change, you know, like you just suddenly, you loaded up Google Chrome, which took a second to open up. So for 2 seconds, your CPU went high temperature and then it dropped down to low temperature again. You don't need the fans to react to that. The heat sinks will take care of that. That's what the heat sinks are for. So what the idea of step up and step down time is how long the fan controller will wait before it actually responds to a change in temperature. And in an ideal world, we kind of want that to be like a couple of seconds, really. But these only go up to 0.7 seconds. So that's not really enough to be useful in my opinion. Although that much being said, it probably will filter out the charismatic revving noises that, for example, i7s can sometimes give. Your i7 CPU cooler can sometimes sit there going "weir, weir" when you're doing things on the desktop, because that CPU temperature is bouncing, because that's what i7s do. And your heatsink will be absorbing those temperature spikes, so you don't need the fan to respond to that. So you could just change that up to 0.7 seconds, and that might just be enough just to filter out that revving noise that you sometimes get. But it's got it, and it's got it on all the fans, which is nice as well. So does that include the pump as well? Yeah, it does include the pump, incidentally, so if you wanted to. Anyway, that sums it up for that. So system and MOS. Oh, okay. We do have the vCore temperature as well. So although I'm not quite sure exactly what this is referring to here, because we've got temperature source here and temperature there. I think that's what it's being compared to, perhaps. I'm not sure. Oh well. Anyway. So that is the hardware monitor. So it's okay TM. It's not the best one I've ever seen, but it ticks the boxes. It does what we need it to do. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, everyone. So that is the MSI Z390 Z390-A Pro motherboard. So yeah, the anti-gamer motherboard. All the performance of a gamer motherboard without all the bells and whistles. So if that's the kind of thing you like, then give this video a big thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.